INFJ versus INFP. At first glance, these two types can seem nearly identical. They're both introspective, idealistic, deeply emotional, and usually a little detached from the chaos of the outside world. You might meet one and think, wow, they're just like me, only to discover, sooner or later, that they're wired very differently under the surface. And those differences, though subtle, are profound. The most defining contrast between INFJs and INFPs lies in how they make decisions. INFJs lead with something called introverted intuition, while INFPs lead with introverted feeling. That might sound like technical jargon, but it plays out in very real, human ways. And I will explain as we go through the video. Check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. Let's talk about the INFJ first. They move through life like visionaries. There's this inner map they're always refining, a quiet certainty about the way things are connected, even when they can't yet explain it in words. INFJs are future-focused. Their intuition constantly scans for patterns, symbols, and possibilities, weaving them into a larger picture. So when an INFJ makes a decision, they're thinking about how it fits into the grander scheme, what effect it will have, not just on them, but on the world around them. And INFPs, they lead with feeling, but not just any feeling. It's deeply personal, rooted in their own moral compass. Their decisions aren't usually based on what will work best long-term for everyone involved, but on what feels right to them on a soul-deep level. Their world is centered around authenticity, values, and emotional truth. If something doesn't align with their inner ethics, they simply can't do it, no matter how practical or logical it may seem. That alone creates a major difference in how these two types function. INFJs tend to be structured, even if only internally. They plan, they anticipate, they create strategies, even if they don't always share them out loud. There's often a quiet intensity to them, a sense that they're moving towards something. They have this deep need to actualize their ideas in the real world. So they often show up as mentors, counselors, thought leaders, people with a purpose and a clear direction. INFPs, on the other hand, are fluid. They follow the emotional current more than the strategic blueprint. Their inner world is like a vast, private ocean, rich, poetic, endlessly reflective. They're less concerned with controlling outcomes and more interested in staying true to themselves. So while INFJs are asking, what does this mean for the bigger picture? INFPs are asking, does this feel right to me right now? It's the difference between internal strategy versus internal harmony. This also affects how they interact socially. INFJs can be surprisingly outward-focused despite being introverts. They often take on the emotions and needs of others, filtering them through their intuitive lens to figure out how best to support, guide, or improve. They are compassionate, but with purpose. You'll notice they give advice more readily, and they're often thinking a few steps ahead, not just emotionally, but practically. INFPs are more self-contained. They feel others' emotions, yes, but they don't internalize them the same way. They're not trying to fix or strategize. Instead, they hold space. They empathize deeply, but they rarely offer unsolicited advice. Where INFJs can come across as emotional guides, INFPs often feel like emotional sanctuaries. Just being around them feels safe, warm, and validating. Another fascinating difference is how they handle conflict. INFJs will usually face it head-on, especially if it threatens their vision or affects others negatively. They'll try to address it with tact, but they won't ignore it forever. Their need for resolution and their tendency to overthink outcomes usually pushes them to confront the issue, even if it's uncomfortable. INFPs, meanwhile, are conflict avoidant to the core. They'd rather sit with their own pain than risk hurting someone else. If you cross an INFP, they probably won't lash out, but they might withdraw completely. It's not a punishment, it's self-preservation. Their boundaries are emotional, and when they're crossed, they shut the door quietly rather than slam it. Then there's expression. INFJs express themselves with intention. They think before they speak, and their words often carry layered meaning. They may write or speak beautifully, but everything is filtered through their internal structure. What's relevant? What's effective? What fits into the bigger picture? It's about impact. INFPs, on the other hand, express themselves like artists, even when they're not trying to be. Their thoughts come out like poetry, raw and honest, and sometimes disorganized. But there's a soul in their words that can be profoundly moving. Their emotional truth takes center stage, and they're less concerned about how their words land, as long as they're real. In relationships, these two types often complement each other beautifully, but they can also clash. INFJs may get frustrated by what they see as the INFP's emotional unpredictability or reluctance to commit to clear decisions. INFPs, in turn, may feel pressured or misunderstood by the INFJ's drive to plan, structure, or fix. INFJs want forward movement. INFPs want emotional peace. That push-pull dynamic can be healing or exhausting, depending on the level of maturity. What they do share is depth. Both types crave meaningful connection. Both have rich inner worlds. Both feel deeply, love fiercely, and see things others miss. But the INFJ turns inward to organize the outer world, while the INFP turns inward to protect their own. So, in a room full of noise, the INFJ is likely mapping out what it all means, how it connects, and what should happen next. INFPs, they're tuning into how it makes them feel, what it says about humanity, and whether their heart is still intact by the end of it all. The longer you sit with both types, the more you start to notice the subtle but powerful contrast between them. It's almost like watching two artists painting on different canvases with the same palette. The colors are familiar, but the strokes, the rhythm, the intention, completely different. Take how they process emotions, for instance. INFJs are emotional, absolutely, but their feelings are more like currents that flow through them, shaped by the people and situations around them. Because of their extroverted feeling, they tend to gauge how they should feel based on the emotional atmosphere in the room. This doesn't make them fake, it makes them adaptive. INFJs feel a strong sense of responsibility for emotional harmony and will often put their own feelings aside if they think it will help others feel more at peace. They feel things deeply but don't always show it, especially if showing it might cause discomfort. INFPs, their emotions don't come from outside. They rise from within. Their dominant, introverted feeling gives them this private emotional universe that they protect like a sacred garden. Their feelings are personal, raw, and often ineffable. They don't filter them through others. They sit with them, study them, and honor them as core truths. That's why when an INFP says something hurts, they mean it in the deepest way. It's not a reaction, it's a revelation. This internal-external contrast extends to how they approach the world at large. INFJs often feel a quiet pressure to do something meaningful with their insights. They want to make a difference, shape things, move the needle in some way. Even if they don't say it out loud, many INFJs are haunted by the idea of wasted potential. Their vision isn't just for them, it's for the collective. They dream of writing the book, launching the movement, helping others find purpose. That inner drive pushes them to act, even when they're emotionally exhausted. INFPs, on the other hand, aren't usually haunted by the need to produce. They're haunted by the need to stay true to themselves, to what they believe in, to what they love. Their contribution to the world might not always look tangible, but it's just as real. They are the soul keepers, the quiet reminders of what really matters. They may not push themselves to be seen, but they strive to live authentically every single day. That integrity is their mission. And then there's time. INFJs are always in conversation with the future. They are long-term thinkers. Even in the middle of a small decision, their minds are calculating possible outcomes, future consequences, ripple effects. This can be both a gift and a burden, because they often overthink, overanalyze, and carry the weight of what could happen. INFPs are more fluid in their relationship with time. They're rooted in the present, or sometimes beautifully lost in the past. They move in emotional time, not strategic time. A moment, a word, a song can bring them back to something they felt years ago. Their decisions are rarely calculated for future gain. They're more concerned with what feels right now. This can make them wonderfully spontaneous or frustratingly indecisive. Check out our INFJ Mastery Course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. When it comes to creativity, both types shine, but again, in different ways. INFJs are structure creators. Their creativity is often focused, purposeful, even visionary. They'll write the story that changes lives, plan the nonprofit, design the curriculum. It's creativity with a mission. INFPs, though, they bleed art. They write poetry that feels like a prayer. They paint feelings that have no words. They sing with voices that carry ache and hope in equal measure. Their creativity doesn't ask to be useful. It just is. And in that pure expression, people often find comfort they didn't know they needed. And let's not forget how these types deal with being misunderstood. INFJs, when misunderstood, often retreat into frustration. They may try to explain themselves, but if that doesn't work, they go silent. They hate being misread because so much of their life is about intention. If you twist their meaning, it cuts them deeply, not just because you misunderstood them, but because they fear they've failed to communicate something important. INFPs take it even more personally. If you misinterpret an INFP, especially if you question their values or accuse them of being inauthentic, it doesn't just sting, it wounds. Because their entire world is built on staying true to themselves. They'll replay the misunderstanding over and over in their heads, not because they need you to like them, but because they need to feel understood, to feel seen for who they are underneath everything. Let's talk about how they experience identity. INFJs often define themselves by their mission, their vision, their impact. They're not content just being, they want to become. Who they are is closely tied to what they're doing for others, or how they're moving the needle of human growth. So they build their identity around their usefulness, their insight, their ability to guide or heal. If they feel like they're not contributing in some meaningful way, it can create an identity crisis. They need purpose the way some people need air. INFPs, meanwhile, ground their identity in something much quieter, their inner truth. They are not concerned with how the world sees them, or even how much they're impacting others. What matters is that their self, that sacred, internal flame, is intact. That they're being honest with who they are, even when no one else sees it. To an INFP, betraying their values is a far greater failure than being misunderstood or even rejected. So while INFJs may ask, am I fulfilling my calling? The INFP is more likely to ask, am I staying true to myself? Even their struggles look different. INFJs are plagued by internal pressure. They often carry the weight of expectation, both real and imagined. Because they see so much potential in themselves and others, they often feel they should do more, be more, give more. They can become perfectionists in disguise, quietly holding themselves to standards that no one else knows about. And because they're often misunderstood, rare, quiet, intense, they carry this haunting sense of isolation, even when surrounded by people. INFPs struggle with the overwhelm of feeling. Their emotions come in tidal waves, and sometimes they don't even know where those waves are coming from. They can feel lost, unsure, drifting, not because they lack depth, but because they have so much of it. Their challenge is often about sorting through all the things they feel, want, and dream of, and trying to figure out what's real, what's possible, and what's just fantasy. And unlike INFJs, they often don't feel compelled to act on it all, which can create guilt or confusion when they feel like they're not doing enough, even though their internal world is rich and exhausting. INFJs crave alignment between mind, heart, and action. They want to understand, to feel, and then do. INFPs crave alignment between heart and soul. They want to feel and to be, whether or not that ever translates into action. INFJs want to change the world for the better. INFPs want the world to be true. Not necessarily better by society's standards, but more authentic, more real. Their friendships are shaped by this too. INFJs often take on the role of the wise one, the advisor, the one who quietly offers insight and help. They tend to form deep one-on-one connections and often feel responsible for the emotional well-being of the people they love. But they rarely show all of themselves. There's always a part of the INFJ that's hidden, a part that belongs only to them, a part no one quite reaches. INFPs are emotional chameleons. They're open with their feelings to a point, but when it gets too vulnerable, too sacred, they retreat. Their emotional transparency can trick people into thinking they're easy to read. But the truth is, their core is deeply private. They don't give it away easily. And when they love in this fierce, protective way that feels almost spiritual. They see the essence of people and love them for who they really are, not who they could become, but who they are right now, in their flawed, tender state. INFJs carry the grief of the world's unfulfilled potential. The missed chances, the injustices, the distance between what is and what could be. They see so clearly what could happen, what should happen, and it hurts when it doesn't. That pain doesn't always show, but it's always there, humming beneath the surface like a quiet lament for a better world that never arrived. INFPs carry the grief of lost innocence, the betrayal of truth, the beauty that goes unseen. They mourn for what was pure and ruined, for what was real but rejected. Their sadness is more nostalgic, more poetic. It's not about what could have been achieved, but what could have been felt if only the world had slowed down enough to notice. So yes, INFJs and INFPs can seem so similar, both deep feelers, both gentle souls, both romantics at heart, but their emotional engines run on different fuels. INFJs are intuitive architects, always building, always planning, always turning insight into action. INFPs are soul-centered poets, always feeling, always questioning, always turning pain into art. And when these two meet, if they're patient enough to understand each other, it can be magic. The INFJ helps the INFP organize their dreams into something tangible. The INFP reminds the INFJ to slow down, to feel without fixing, to just be. They reflect each other's depth back like mirrors, but one is made of glass, the other of water. Different, yet both reflecting something real. Check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video.